We know of many great and prominent leaders in Black history, such as Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Rosa Parks, Thurgood Marshall, Huey Newton, Jesse Jackson, Harriet Tubman, Shirley Chisholm, Frederick Douglass, and so many more. But there are some names that are obscure, and we want to bring to light their accomplishments in Black history leadership and all they have done for us to be where we are today.
Stokely Carmichael immigrated to New York City in 1952. He enrolled in Howard University in 1960. While he was there, he joined a group called the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, also known as SNCC, and the Nonviolent Action Group. In 1961, Stokely Carmichael was one of the several freedom fighters who traveled through the South challenging segregation laws in interstate transportation. For his participation, he was arrested and jailed for 50 days in Jackson, Mississippi. Carmichael still continued his involvement with the Civil Rights Movement and SNCC after his graduation from Howard University in 1964. That summer, he joined SNCC in Loudoun County, Alabama, for an African American voter registration drive and helped to organize the Loudoun County Freedom Organization, an independent political party. A Black Panther was chosen as the party's emblem, which became a powerful image adopted in homage by the Black Panther Party.
Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey was a Jamaican-born Black nationalist and leader of the Pan-Africanism movement, which sought to unify and connect people of African descent worldwide. In the United States, he was a noted civil rights activist who founded the Negro World newspaper, a shipping company called Black Star Line, and the Universal Negro Improvement Association. As a group, they advocated for separate but equal status for persons of African ancestry, and as such, they sought to establish independent Black states around the world, notably in Liberia on the west coast of Africa. He taught that Blacks would be respected only when they were economically strong.
James Baldwin. The eldest of 9 children, he grew up in poverty in the Black ghetto of Harlem in New York City. From age 14 to 16, he was active during out-of-school hours as a preacher in a small revivalist church, a period he wrote about in his semi-autobiographical first and finest novel, Go Tell It to the Mountain, written in 1953. After graduation from high school, he began a restless period of ill-paid jobs, self-study, and literary apprenticeship in Greenwich Village, the bohemian corner of New York City. He left in 1948 for Paris. In 1957, he returned to the United States and became an active participant in the civil rights struggle that swept the nation. Nobody Knows My Name, written in 1961, explores Black and white relations in the United States. This theme was also central to his novel, Another Country, written in 1962, which examines other racial issues. One of his most famous quotes says, "The paradox of education is precisely this, that as one begins to become conscious, one examines the society in which he is being educated." James Baldwin.
Ruby Bridges. As some wonder if children should learn much about the evils of racism, many Black children did not have that luxury. They lived through racism. They had no choice. At the tender age of 6, Ruby Bridges advanced the cause of civil rights in November 1960, when she became the first African American student to integrate an elementary school in the South. Ruby and her mother were escorted by 4 federal marshals to the school every day that year. She walked past crowds screaming vicious slurs at her. She was firm in her stance. She was undeterred. She later said that she only became frightened when she saw a woman holding a Black baby doll in a coffin. She spent her first days in the principal's office due to the chaos created as angry white parents pulled their children from school. Over time, other African American students enrolled. In 1964, artist Norman Rockwell celebrated her courage with a painting of that first day entitled "The Problem We All Live With." A lifelong activist for racial equality, in 1999, Ruby established the Ruby Bridges Foundation to promote tolerance and create change through education.
W.E.B. Du Bois. Du Bois graduated from Fisk University, a historically black institution in Nashville, Tennessee, in 1888. He received a PhD from Harvard University in 1895. His doctoral dissertation, The Suppression of the African Slave Trade to the United States of America from 1638 to 1870, was published in 1896. Although Du Bois took an advanced degree in history, he was broadly trained in the social sciences, and at the time when sociologists were theorizing about race relations, he was conducting empirical inquiries into the conditions of Black people in America. For more than a decade, he devoted himself to sociological investigations of Blacks in America, producing 16 research monographs published between 1897 and 1914 at Atlanta University in Georgia, where he was a professor, as well as The Philadelphia Negro, a social study, 1899, the first case study of a Black community in the United States. Although Du Bois had originally believed that social science would provide the knowledge to solve the race problem, he gradually came to the conclusion that in a climate of racism, expressed in such evils as lynching, peonage, disenfranchisement, Jim Crow segregation laws, and race riots, social change could be accomplished only through agitation and protest. Du Bois once said, "The problem of the 21st century is the problem of the color line." Unfortunately, a quote that still exists to this day.
Angela Davis. Born in 1944, January 26, she is a political activist, academic, author, and has been highly involved in the civil rights movement in the United States. She is well known for her work and influence on racial justice, women's rights, and criminal justice reform. Davis is a professor emerita at the University of California, Santa Cruz, in its History of Consciousness Department, and a former director of the university's Feminist Studies Department. In the 1960s and 70s, Davis was known for her association with the Black Panthers Party. For a time, she even appeared on the Federal Bureau of Investigation's 10 Most Wanted. In 1997, Davis co-founded Critical Resistance, an organization working toward the dismantling of prisons, or what Davis and others have called the prison industrial complex. She received her BA at Brandeis University, her MA at University of California, and her PhD at Humboldt University. One of the quotes that she writes is, "Revolution is a serious thing. The most serious thing about a revolutionary's life. When one commits oneself to the struggle, it must be for a lifetime."
Ida B. Wells was born into slavery. She was educated at Rust University, and at age 14 began teaching in a country school. She continued to teach after moving to Memphis, Tennessee in 1884, and attended Fisk University in Nashville during several summer sessions. In 1887, the Tennessee Supreme Court, reversing a circuit court decision, ruled against Wells in a suit she had brought against the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad for having been forcibly removed from her seat after she had refused to give it up for one in a colored-only car. Using the pen name Iola, Wells in 1891 also wrote some newspaper articles critical of the education available to African American children. Her teaching contract was not renewed. She, thereupon, turned to journalism. In 1892, after 3 friends of hers had been lynched by a mob, Wells began an editorial campaign against lynching that quickly led to the sacking of her newspaper office. She continued her anti-lynching crusade anyway, first as the staff writer for the New York Age, and then as a lecturer and organizer of anti-lynching societies. Wells Barnett contributed to the Chicago Conservative, her husband's newspaper, and to other local journals, published a detailed look at lynching, a red record, in 1895, and was active in organizing local African American women in various causes, from the anti-lynching campaign to the suffrage movement.
Ella Baker began her involvement with the NAACP in 1940. She worked as a field secretary and then served as director of branches from 1943 until 1946. Inspired by the historic bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama in 1955, Baker co-founded the organization in friendship to raise money to fight against Jim Crow laws in the Deep South. In 1957, Baker moved to Atlanta to help organize Martin Luther King's new organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC. She also ran a voter registration campaign called the Crusade for Citizenship. In New York City and the South, Ella Baker worked alongside some of the most noted civil rights leaders of the 20th century, including W.E.B. Du Bois, Thurgood Marshall, A. Philip Randolph, and Martin Luther King Jr. She also mentored many emerging activists such as Diane Nash, Stokely Carmichael, Rosa Parks, and Bob Moses, whom she first mentored as leaders in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC. Baker has been called one of the most important American leaders of the 20th century and perhaps the most influential woman in the civil rights movement. Though these names may not be so well known in the classroom, it's important to know their impact, not only in Black history, but in American and world history. Thank you.